So this is the real secret that Naomi has been keeping from her family, and when it finally begins to surface on Beyond the Gates, it doesn't arrive in a neat confession or a tearful speech across a dining room table, but rather like a hairline crack spreading across the foundation of everything the Dupree family believes about loyalty, sacrifice, and love. Because Naomi's secret isn't just about her. It's about the choice she made years ago, quietly and alone, when she realized that telling the truth would cost too much, not just to herself, but to the people she loves most. And as the episodes unfold, viewers slowly learn that Naomi has been carrying the weight of a life-altering decision she never shared with anyone, including her husband Jacob, a decision tied to a medical diagnosis she received long before the BRCA storyline ever exploded into the open, back when she was younger, scared, and still trying to prove she was strong enough to stand on her own in a family that prizes resilience above vulnerability. Because what Naomi never told her family is that she knew she was at risk long before the test results everyone now knows about, that she was offered genetic screening years earlier after a closed-door consultation with a specialist connected to her mother's side of the family, and instead of sharing that information, instead of looping in her parents or even Jacob, Naomi chose silence. A silence that hardened into habit because at the time she was already pregnant, already grappling with the fear that she might pass something irreversible to her child, and rather than confront that fear publicly, she made a private, devastating choice that would ripple outward for years without anyone realizing it. And as the spoilers reveal, Naomi secretly underwent additional testing during her pregnancy. Tests that confirmed not only her own genetic mutation but the likelihood that her unborn child could inherit it as well. And faced with that knowledge, Naomi chose to alter her medical care in ways she never disclosed, declining certain interventions, signing off on others under a different name, all to keep her family from knowing how frayed she truly was. And the show takes its time unraveling this, using flashbacks that show a younger Naomi sitting alone in sterile hospital rooms, listening as doctors explain probabilities and risks while she nods bravely, masking the panic that would later become her armor. And what makes this secret so explosive isn't just the medical aspect, it's the emotional betrayal embedded within it. Because Naomi didn't just keep information to herself, she rewrote the story her family thought they knew, letting them believe she was blindsided by recent revelations when in reality, she had been living with the truth for years, shaping her choices, her distance, her occasional coldness, and even her moments of reckless bravery around the knowledge that her time and her body might betray her at any moment. And this recontextualizes so many past scenes for the audience, moments where Naomi seemed overly controlling, inexplicably withdrawn, or intensely protective of her child, moments that now read as the behavior of a woman who believed she was on borrowed time and refused to let fear define her publicly. And as the storyline builds, cracks begin to show, not because Naomi decides to confess, but because the truth starts forcing its way out through people she never expected, including an old medical file that resurfaces when the hospital updates its records, a file that lists Naomi's prior genetic counseling sessions and dates that don't align with the narrative she's told her family. And when Jacob stumbles across this discrepancy, it doesn't immediately lead to confrontation. Instead, it leads to suspicion, quiet observation, and the kind of emotional distance that is far more dangerous than anger. Because Jacob begins to realize that the woman he loves has been living a parallel life of fear and decision-making without him, and the hurt isn't just about the secret itself, it's about the exclusion, the realization that Naomi didn't trust him enough to share her worst moments. And when this tension finally erupts, it does so not in a dramatic shouting match, but in a devastatingly quiet scene where Jacob asks a single question, "How long have you known?" And Naomi's silence answers louder than any words could. And the fallout from that moment ripples through the family, because once Jacob knows there is more to the story, the past starts rearranging itself, conversations take on new meanings, and Naomi's parents begin to notice the inconsistencies they once dismissed as stress or personality quirks. And as the show peels back the layers, another bombshell drops. Naomi's secret wasn't just about knowing her own risk, it was about making a decision regarding her child that she has never forgiven herself for, A decision to avoid early testing that might have confirmed her child's genetic status, because Naomi believed that knowing too early would rob her child of a normal childhood, and in making that choice, she also robbed Jacob of the chance to be part of that decision, a choice that now comes roaring back into the present as doctors recommend testing. That could have been done years earlier, and the guilt Naomi carries becomes almost unbearable, manifesting in sleepless nights, short tempers, and moments of self-sabotage that push away the very people she needs most, and the spoilers tease that the family's reaction to the full truth will be deeply divided, with some seeing Naomi's actions as an act of love twisted by fear, while others view it as an unforgivable betrayal that undermined the foundation of trust they believed bound them together. And what makes this storyline especially powerful is that Beyond the Gates refuses to paint Naomi as either hero or villain, instead presenting her as a woman shaped by a system that taught her strength meant silence and that vulnerability was a liability, a woman who thought protecting her family meant carrying the pain alone. And as the truth finally spills out in fragments, through overheard conversations, medical confirmations, and emotionally charged confrontations, the audience is left to wrestle with the same question the characters face. At what point does protection become deception? And can love survive when the truth arrives too late to change the past? And in classic Beyond the Gates fashion, the revelation doesn't resolve cleanly, instead setting the stage for long-term consequences that will echo through future storylines, including Jacob's struggle to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the woman who made these impossible choices without him, the child. At the center of it all, grappling with the realization that their life has been shaped by decisions made before they could speak, and Naomi herself standing at a crossroads where she must finally decide whether she will continue to define strength as secrecy or risk everything by letting herself be fully seen, because the real secret Naomi kept wasn't just the diagnosis or the tests or the choices. It was the fear that if her family knew how broken she felt, they might stop seeing her as the unshakable center she worked so hard to be. And as Beyond the Gates moves forward, this revelation promises to transform Naomi from a guarded pillar into one of the show's most emotionally complex figures, proving once again that in Fairmont Crest, the most devastating secrets aren't the ones people keep to hurt others, but the ones they keep because they believe they have to suffer alone. And as if that revelation weren't already enough to fracture the emotional spine of Beyond the Gates, the spoilers make it clear that Naomi's secret doesn't stop at what she knew or the choices she made in silence, because buried beneath the medical files and half-truths is an even deeper layer that reframes her entire relationship with her family, especially her parents, revealing that Naomi's instinct to hide didn't come out of nowhere but was learned, conditioned, and reinforced by a childhood marked by subtle but persistent messages that weakness was dangerous and that the family's image mattered more than individual pain. And in a series of emotionally charged flashbacks, viewers see a teenage Naomi overhearing hushed conversations about relatives who are quietly handled, their illnesses managed behind closed doors so as not to disrupt the family's public narrative, moments that planted the seed that survival meant silence, and that love was something you proved by not burdening others. And this context becomes crucial when the storyline reveals that Naomi did, in fact, attempt to tell the truth once, years ago, before she married Jacob, only to be gently but firmly redirected by a family member who warned her that sharing unnecessary fears would only create panic and instability, a moment that taught Naomi that honesty had consequences she wasn't willing to risk, and from that point forward, she became an expert at compartmentalization, building emotional walls so polished that even she began to forget where the truth ended and the performance began. And this skill, once praised as strength, becomes the very thing that threatens to destroy her when the present-day fallout accelerates, because as Jacob processes the depth of Naomi's secrecy, he begins to question every major decision they've ever made together, wondering how many of those moments were shaped by information he never had, and the tension escalates when he realizes that Naomi's reluctance to expand their family, a point of contention they quietly buried years earlier, was never about timing or finances as she claimed, but about fear, a fear she never trusted him enough to name. And this realization devastates Jacob not just because of what it cost them, but because it exposes a gap in their marriage where intimacy should have lived. And while Jacob struggles with betrayal, Naomi's parents are forced into an even more uncomfortable reckoning as pieces of the past resurface that suggest their well-meaning insistence on staying strong may have taught their daughter to disappear emotionally when she needed them most. And the show leans into this generational tension, drawing sharp contrasts between what the family believed they were modeling and the unintended damage that followed, especially in scenes where Naomi finally confronts them with the truth, not in anger but in exhaustion, admitting that she didn't hide because she didn't love them, but because she loved them so much she was terrified of becoming their source of fear. And this confession cracks something open, leading to raw, unguarded moments that strip away decades of emotional distance. Yet even as these conversations unfold, the damage cannot simply be undone, because the medical implications of Naomi's choices now demand urgent attention, forcing the family to confront timelines that cannot be reversed and opportunities that have passed. And the spoilers hint at a heartbreaking moment where Naomi must explain to her child why certain information is only coming to light now, a scene expected to be one of the most emotionally intense of the season. As innocence collides with the weight of adult fear, and the show refuses to offer easy answers, instead allowing each character to respond in their own imperfect way, some with compassion, some with anger, some with devastating disappointment, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond the immediate family and into the broader Fairmont Crest community, where whispers begin to circulate and alliances subtly shift as people reassess who Naomi really is. And yet, in classic Beyond the Gates fashion, the spoilers suggest that this exposure, painful as it is, may ultimately become Naomi's turning point, because for the first time, she is no longer carrying the burden alone, and while that vulnerability terrifies her, it also offers the possibility of a different future, one built not on silent endurance but on shared truth, even if that truth arrives too late to save the past. And as the storyline pushes forward, Naomi's journey becomes less about the secret itself and more about the aftermath of its release. The slow, uncertain work of rebuilding trust, redefining strength and learning that love does not require martyrdom, setting the stage for a powerful evolution that will echo long after the immediate spoilers fade, proving that on Beyond the Gates, the most consequential drama isn't found in the secret kept, but in what happens when the walls finally come down. And even after all of that, Beyond the Gates makes it painfully clear that Naomi's secret continues to unfold in ways no one, including Naomi herself, fully anticipated, because once the truth is no longer contained, it begins to interact with every unresolved fracture in her life, pulling old wounds to the surface and exposing how deeply her silence shaped not just her family, but her sense of self. And spoilers reveal that Naomi enters a period of emotional freefall where the carefully controlled version of herself she has curated for years starts to erode, leading to moments that are raw, messy, and frighteningly honest. Moments where she admits she doesn't actually know who she is without the secret. Because for so long her identity was built around managing fear rather than living alongside hope, and this inner unraveling becomes most evident in her relationship with Jacob, where attempts at reconciliation are repeatedly interrupted by the sheer weight of what was lost, years of shared decision-making, intimacy, and mutual trust. And while Jacob desperately wants to move forward, he struggles with flashes of resentment that catch him off guard, resentment not rooted in cruelty, but in grief for the life he thought they were building together. And the show treats this tension with remarkable restraint, allowing silences to linger and conversations to end without resolution, reinforcing the idea that some betrayals, even unintentional ones, cannot be healed on a neat timeline. And as Naomi grapples with this reality, she is forced to confront another truth she has never voiced aloud. That part of her secrecy was driven not just by fear for her family, but by a profound sense of shame, a belief that her body's perceived betrayal somehow reflected a personal failure, a theme that resonates powerfully as the series explores how women in Fairmont Crest are often expected to endure quietly while maintaining composure. And this internalized shame surfaces in a heartbreaking scene where Naomi admits she didn't want to be seen as damaged, a word that carries generations. of judgment and expectation, and this confession reframes her secrecy as both an act of protection and a form of self-erasure. And while some family members begin to soften as they understand this, others remain stuck in their pain, particularly as new information emerges suggesting that Naomi's earlier choices may have altered outcomes in ways no one can definitively measure, creating a lingering sense of what if that haunts every interaction, and the spoilers hint at a pivotal medical crisis that forces the family to make decisions together under pressure, decisions that mirror the ones Naomi once made alone. And in these moments, the contrast is stark and instructive, showing how shared fear, while excruciating, can also be connective, something Naomi never allowed herself to believe. And this becomes the emotional crux of her arc, as she slowly begins to participate rather than manage, to ask for help instead of preemptively shielding others from pain. Even when doing so, feels like standing exposed in a storm, and the ripple effects extend outward as Naomi's story inspires parallel reckonings among other characters, who begin questioning their own silences and the cost of maintaining appearances, subtly transforming the tone of the show as secrets once buried start demanding daylight. And yet, Beyond the Gates never lets Naomi off easily, reminding viewers that accountability and compassion must coexist, that understanding why a secret was kept does not erase the hurt it caused, and this balance is most poignantly illustrated when Naomi faces her child's quiet, heartbreaking question, whether things might have been different if she had spoken sooner, a question Naomi cannot answer, and does not try to soften with platitudes, choosing instead to acknowledge the pain honestly for the first time, a moment that signals real growth even as it underscores irreversible loss. And as the season continues, Naomi's journey becomes less about redemption and more about integration, about learning to hold both the love that motivated her choices and the harm those choices caused without collapsing under the weight of either. And in doing so, Beyond the Gates delivers one of its most nuanced storylines yet, using Naomi's secret not as a single shocking twist, but as a living, evolving force that reshapes relationships, challenges generational narratives, and ultimately asks its audience to consider whether true strength lies not in enduring alone, but in allowing ourselves to be known, even when the truth arrives late and changes everything. And still, Beyond the Gates refuses to let Naomi's secret settle into a single emotional lane, because just when the family believes they've reached the bottom of the truth, another layer quietly shifts into view, revealing that Naomi's silence also altered the course of someone else's life in ways she never intended. And spoilers tease that an old acquaintance from her past, someone connected to the clinic where Naomi first received her genetic counseling, re-enters Fairmont Crest, carrying knowledge that Naomi thought had disappeared forever, knowledge that suggests Naomi once made a choice that indirectly protected another family member at her own expense, a choice that involved redirecting attention, resources, or even suspicion away from someone more vulnerable. And this revelation complicates the narrative even further, because it positions Naomi not only as someone who hid out of fear, but as someone who willingly absorbed consequences so others would not have to, reinforcing her deeply ingrained belief that love meant sacrifice without acknowledgement. And when this information surfaces, it creates new fault lines within the family, as some begin to question whether Naomi's silence was as selfish as they once believed, while others bristle at the idea that she continued to make unilateral decisions on behalf of everyone else, even when those decisions came from a place of love. And this tension erupts in a powerful ensemble episode where multiple confrontations unfold in parallel, each character grappling with a different version of the same truth, that Naomi has always been both protector and deceiver, caretaker and gatekeeper, and the emotional weight of these scenes is amplified by the realization that Naomi herself never felt entitled to the moral credit for her sacrifices, viewing them instead as obligations she owed simply for existing within the family. And as the fallout spreads, Naomi begins to physically falter, her body reflecting the years of stress and suppression she has carried, a subtle but haunting reminder that secrets do not stay contained within the mind. And this decline forces Jacob into a reckoning of his own, as he confronts the terrifying possibility that his anger, justified as it may be, could cost him the chance to truly support the woman he still loves. leading to a moment where he must decide whether he is willing to meet Naomi where she is now, rather than where he wishes she had been years ago, and the spoilers suggest that this choice becomes a defining one, not just for their marriage, but for how the show frames forgiveness. Not as absolution, but as a willingness to move forward without all the answers. And meanwhile, Naomi's parents face their own public undoing as whispers in Fairmont Crest evolve into quiet judgment, forcing them to confront the very culture of silence they once upheld, now turned against them. And in an especially poignant twist, Naomi becomes the unlikely catalyst for change within the family, urging openness not because it is easy, but because she has lived the cost of secrecy and can no longer bear to watch others repeat her mistakes, and this shift transforms her from a passive keeper of pain into an active, if imperfect, advocate for honesty, even when that honesty risks rejection. And as the season barrels toward its climax, the spoilers hint at a moment of devastating clarity, where Naomi finally articulates the truth she has avoided for decades, that she was never afraid of losing her family's love, but of becoming the reason they were afraid, a realization that lands with crushing force as the family finally understands the emotional logic that governed her choices. And yet, understanding does not erase consequence, and the show honors that complexity by allowing relationships to remain altered, not broken, but changed in ways that demand ongoing effort, patience, and humility. And in the end, Naomi's secret stands as one of Beyond the Gates' most layered arcs, not because of the shock it delivers, but because of the way it lingers, reshaping identity, redefining strength, and reminding viewers that sometimes the most damaging lies are the ones we tell ourselves about what love requires, leaving Naomi, and everyone around her, to reckon with the possibility that true connection begins not when we protect others from fear, but when we trust them enough to face it with us.